Hi, I'm Demetria, and you're listening to Soul Podcasting. This is a podcast where I share weekly insights, advice, and support for new and veteran podcasters. I'm your Impact Podcast Coach, and I'm here to inspire and motivate you to launch and leverage your impactful podcast. You're listening to episode number 3. So last week we talked about reasons to start a podcast. I gave you 5 specific reasons that I thought you should definitely consider beginning one if you haven't already. If you're on the fence, if you're thinking about starting one, then that episode is for you. Go back and listen to episode number 2 and episode number 1. I introduced myself and told you all about my history with podcasting and how much I just love this medium of communication with the masses. I think it's such a great way to communicate your message to people that are in your tribe. So if you have a group of people that you definitely need to be reaching with your message, then I just believe that podcasting is the way to go. Now that we've established my reasons for podcasting in the first couple of episodes, I want to talk about your purpose and the reason why you might be choosing to podcast. And we'll talk a bit about your brand. So purpose and brand kind of go hand in hand. And so some of the things that I'm sharing with you today are in my free downloadable blueprint. And I have this available for you at my website. It is about 21 pages or so. It is chock full of important information about starting up your podcast. You will want to get your hands on this. So stop by impactpodcastcoach.com to download it. And then you can follow along with me on today's show, as well as future shows where I'll be talking about some content from this blueprint. So this is my blueprint, but it's also my framework for everything that I teach at Impact Podcast Coach. And it's my soul podcasting blueprint. I named it after the podcast because it's all about creating a podcast that aligns with your soul's message. I often talk about heart alignment and soul alignment because I'm a woman of faith and it's really infused in everything that I do. And so I like to talk about those things. And I think that everything that you've been given, the message you've been given to share is your soul's message. And one way to definitely be able to get that message out there is through your podcast. So when you're deciding on a purpose for your brand, I know that the first step is always the hardest part of any process, but it's very necessary and essential. So before you begin podcasting, you want to ask yourself a couple of questions about why you want to embark on this project, because it is a huge project and a huge undertaking. There's nothing super easy about podcasting, but it also doesn't have to be excruciatingly difficult. So I want to give you the happy medium that it is. And I don't want to pull any punches here. I don't want to pull any wool over your eyes to make you feel like this is going to be so awesome and so easy, because it's not so easy. You really do need to get some help on board when you podcast, because after a while you'll realize, with all the editing, that there's a lot of work involved behind the scenes with making a really good and effective podcast. So I am here to give you some balance. I don't want to undersell you on it. I don't want to oversell you on it. I want to tell you just like it is. Podcasting is hard. However, podcasting is not only very fulfilling for those of us who love podcasting and who have seen the results of reaching masses, reaching so many people with our message, but it can also be lucrative. So it depends on how you want to take the podcast. It depends on what your goals and objectives are. So let's first of all start off with discovering your purpose. And the very first thing you'll want to ask yourself is the message. What is your core message? What message do you want to share on your podcast? So this is something you'll need to figure out really, really soon if you want to begin podcasting for purpose. So podcasting is just the means by which you're going to get your message out to the world, but you need to have a message to begin with, right? So it's like starting a brand. So if you already have a brand online, you already own a business, you already have a ministry, you already have something going, and you just want a podcast to accompany what you're already doing, this is going to be an easier process for you, because all you have to do is Just take what you're already doing and turn it into an audio form. That's it. And come up with content that you're already creating anyway for your website or for your ministry or for your business, and just convert that to audio clips that you share on your podcast. However, if this is a brand new brand for you, then you will want to consider definitely why you're getting into podcasting and what your purpose is to begin with. So what your message is going to be that you want to share, you'll need to sit down and take some time to figure that out. So I have yet another free resource for you that you may want to pick up just to help you gain some clarity if you don't already have a clear idea of what you want to do. And it's called the Business Clarity Guide. It's called Gaining Business Clarity, and this is where you're going to discover your passion and gain clarity on your business purpose. So you can replace the word business with ministry or organization or podcast, but this is going to help you get a foundation for what you're going to be talking about on your podcast and what message you actually want to be sharing. The second question to ask yourself is, why are you passionate about this topic? So I have talked to hundreds of women over the years on my podcast. I've interviewed so many people, and each woman that I've spoken to has been passionate about something in particular, which is why I asked them to be on the show. So when they come to the show, they came already prepared, already passionate about the topic, and ready to have a deep and meaningful conversation that could guide my audience and my listeners into next steps. So think about why you're passionate about the topic. Is it an experience that you've had in life that has gotten you to where you are today, something that has taught you a valuable lesson? Maybe you've gone through some painful experiences that can help other people to not only come through on the other side, but to overcome the pain, or maybe to learn how to cope with the life that you have today. Maybe there's something in your message that has a healing element to it. So you want to see what your purpose is. Is it to heal people? Is it to help people? Perhaps your message is to excite and motivate people. So maybe you want to get someone excited about creating that next business venture. Maybe you want to get people excited about writing their first book. Maybe that's what your business is about. Maybe you are passionate about helping women with their health. I've interviewed lots of health coaches on my podcasts, and their passion is to help women feel better, and to feel better emotionally, or feel better physically in their bodies, or feel better in their mental health. So what are you passionate about? And what message do you want to share? Number 3, what is it that you hope to achieve with your podcast? So do you want to help your listeners to get to their next level in business? How are you going to achieve that through your podcast? So let's think about end results. Are you going to lead them through their experience with you on the podcast by providing an opportunity for them to connect with you outside of the podcast, so that they can then start a coaching program with you or purchase your product and service? How are you going to make sure that your objectives for your podcast are achieved? What is it that you hope to accomplish? Do you want to have more people sign up for your mailing list? Do you want to have more people download your ebooks? Do you want to have more people sign up for your coaching program? Or are you just at this moment beginning your podcast and really want to just gain more listeners in the first place? Just get more people listening, more people engaged on your podcast, more people responding to you, interacting with you outside of the podcast. What are your objectives? Number 4, how will your podcast stand out from others in your niche? Now, this is where you have to do a little bit of research to see what are other people doing who are talking about a similar topic as you. Not to compare yourself and make yourself feel any worse than anyone else, but just to see what's out there. It's important to know what is already out there within your niche. So look around a little bit, not to the point of, again, making yourself feel that you need to second guess yourself. This is not about, you're having to be perfect or to retract what you're doing because it doesn't seem good enough anymore now that you've seen what other people are already doing. So you don't want to second guess yourself. We don't want to continue the idea of having imposter syndrome. So we don't want to use this researching as a time to run away from what we know we want to do. However, take this time to research. Take the time to see what people are doing, and then you will be able to see how you are different. What differentiates your podcast from other people's podcast ideas? How are you going to be a little bit different? When I started my podcast about mompreneurs, there weren't a lot of other mompreneur podcasts out there, at least with the title mompreneur in the title. And so I kind of had a little bit of leverage at that time. Now there are many, many more mompreneur podcasts. And so if I were coming into podcasting about mompreneurs at this moment, post 2020, now that there are many more podcasts out there, I would have a little bit more second guessing myself, I think, to wonder what can I bring to the table that's different than all the other podcasts about being a mompreneur. But thankfully, I didn't have that at the time when I created Mompreneurs in Heels. And so I just went with what was in my heart. And I saw there were a few other podcasts, but I realized that what I was bringing to the table was very different because it was my experience. And it was my take on life. And I knew that my experience was different than most mompreneurs because I had the homeschooling element and I had a lot of other things that were just a bit different. So I knew that I was bringing some different type of experience to the mompreneur market. And the same for my homeschool podcast. At the time, there weren't a lot of other homeschool podcasts out there. So I didn't have a lot of quote unquote competition. So there wasn't a lot to compare to, but the few that I did compare to, I realized I was just different and I owned that and I was okay with that. And so I didn't try to make my podcast like anybody else's. I just did what I did the way that I do it. Right. And that's what makes you unique. And so that podcast was really successful. And even to this day, still receives a lot of listens and downloads every month. Because I just come to the microphone with my experience and my love for what I'm talking about, my passion, and I just bring it. And I always like to bring guests that, offer the same type of energy. So with this podcast about podcasting, again, we have quite a few podcasts about podcasting, but it's not saturated at this moment that I'm recording this. There are quite a few, but again, there's enough room for everyone at the table who wants to create a podcast about this topic. And so I don't think that I'm adding any noise to the table. And I think that my view on podcasting is a little bit different. And I just use my uniqueness to really highlight my experience and my goal for what I'm trying to accomplish on this show. And so that's what I'm asking you to do. Really figure out how your podcast will stand out. It's okay if there are 500 other podcasts about writing and you are a freelance writer and you want to make a podcast about writing. Go ahead and make that podcast about writing. It doesn't matter if it seems to be saturated. And if you're scrolling through iTunes and you're running across hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of other podcasts about that topic, you might feel discouraged at first, but don't, because I want you also to see that the more podcasts there are, that means that there are more people most likely looking for content about that subject. So you have a lot of podcasts in the iTunes catalog about writing because a lot of people are writers, right? And the thing with me at the moment doing a podcast about podcasting, there probably aren't as many people that are podcasting as there are people writing. You know what I mean? So it's just a little bit of a different view, but it doesn't mean that you don't go for it and that you don't create this podcast because you see that there are hundreds of other podcasts about your topic. Go for it, because remember, you are different. So differentiate yourself from other people who are podcasting and see what you bring to the table that is unique. You'll want to ask yourself questions about who your podcast serves in the audience. Are you there to entertain, to inform, or educate? And we'll talk more about that in another episode about the different types of podcasting and the purposes. But I want you to ask yourself those 4 questions for now, just to get started. And next time I come to you next week, we're going to add more to the table and really flesh this out, because I love helping you to learn how to podcast. This is part of my calling right now, is something I love to do. So as I've started my coaching, I'm just so exuberant, so excited that I have this opportunity to share with you about something that I've been doing for 17 years that has made my life so completely different than it would have been had I not ever discovered podcasting. I've met so many wonderful people. I've had so many wonderful experiences, so many meaningful, valuable conversations with people through podcasting. It's almost a little bit addictive, just to tell the truth. Once you get into it and you start having these conversations that change your life, you'll see that you won't want to put down the mic. So it's just beautiful. Not only does it change your life, but you're changing others in the process. So just a beautiful experience. And I hope that I can get you on board with me with starting your podcast. I just really am excited about that. So if you're interested in starting one, or if you already have a podcast, but just need a little support, even just for clarity on what you're doing, or if you have any questions about how to move forward with some ideas you might have to implement in your podcast, that your already existing podcast, maybe you need some support with editing. So I am starting to build a team very slowly at this point, but it's going to grow, and I have editing services on my roster. So if you need some editing, right now it's very limited time that I have to help with that, but I am starting my coaching with some editing services as well. So if you're interested in getting your podcast edited 2, 3, or 4 episodes per month, that is something that you can definitely do with me and my team as I grow it out. And I would love to have you talk with me about that. So visit me at impactpodcastcoach.com. And I would love to have you follow me on Instagram. My name is Demetria Zinga on Instagram. You can find me there, and I talk all about podcasting now. So looking forward to connecting with you in the future, and I can't wait to come back with more next week. So until then, I'll talk to you next week.